Hey, folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio. Thank you to all the new subscribers and all past subscribers. I've been having a lot of fun, as you could gather, talking about the Beatles here, the past, the present, the group, the solo years, what's going on in the news, you name it, we cover it all here on this channel. And this time out, I thought we'd have some fun with another Paul McCartney solo topic. I thought it might be interesting for those of you who collect, shall we say, unauthorized recordings. If you're familiar with what hasn't been released from Paul McCartney so far, me and my guests will all list our top 3 and maybe more of what we feel are the best unreleased songs from Paul's solo career that so far he hasn't released. And I'm sure that you're aware that, there are a lot of real important bootlegs like Cold Cuts or Pizza and Fairy Tales that have a lot of songs that were unreleased for a long time, and they've been trickling out a lot on McCartney's archival box sets, also on CD singles before that. So you have to be aware of what's come out and what hasn't so far. But I thought that I would bring back my guests from my last show. That's Tom Hunyady and Andy Nicholes from the Two Legs Solo Paul McCartney Podcast, as McCartney is their favorite. And also, I thought we'd bring back Dylan Sevey. Dylan hails from Nashville. He plays drums, guitar, sings, writes music. He could do it all. And actually, oh, look at this.
Yes, right?
Wow. Congratulations, Dylan. He's a married man now.
After 10 years of dating, I finally tricked her, so it's officially her fault at this point. So.
Wow, 10 years. It took me 10 years to get married as well. What's the rush?
You and I have quite a lot in common, Ken.
Yeah. But for all that are interested, Dylan is no longer on the market. Just letting you all know. But Dylan, welcome to the show. Good to have you back. Last time we had you on, we were talking about whether or not you and my other guests thought the 4 Beatles would ever reunite had John not get killed. Same thing with George dying as well. So Dylan, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Ken. It's always a pleasure to be on. I'm really excited to talk about this. I definitely have my fair share of Dutch imports by Mr. McCartney. So very excited to talk about some of these songs.
Yeah, and I'm sure many of our viewers have collected some of these Dutch imports, and there may be some favorite songs of yours that you might be banging your head against the wall saying, why on earth didn't he release this song? So that's what this list is. And like I said before, a lot of what came out on bootlegs has surfaced now on commercial recordings, but there's still quite a lot. And I cherry picked a few of my favorites. I'm sure everybody has their own. But why don't we start this time with Andy?
So are we going to go all 3 in one shot, or are we going to rotate?
Why don't we rotate? Do it differently this time.
Okay. So I think my co-host and I are going to have 1 or 2 of the same choices out of these 3. So I chose 3 and 1 with an honorable mention. And I'll just go 3, 2, 1 in that order. But for just my third, before I pass it off back to you, Ken, I'm going to go with one of Tom's favorites, Yvonne's The One, which I'm sure is in his list. I don't know if it's 3 or 2 or 1. Yvonne is a great song, the press to play outtake, recorded in '85. I first heard of it on a Dutch import, shall we say, called B-Sides, that I got when I was a teenager at a Beatle Fest up on the 3rd floor in a scary room, and paid a lot of money for it. But I got it then, and that was one of my first exposure to that, and a lot of other songs at the time. And I was just like, man, how does this song not go on an album? I mean, of all songs, I mean, it's just, and I really like the song, but I think Tom likes it a lot more than I do. I think it's a fantastic song. I don't get tired of it. Great vocal on it. throughout the whole thing, really, especially towards the latter half of that song, the falsetto, the break in it. Just a tremendous song. I don't know if it's Yvonne's the One. I've seen it credited as Yvonne's the One. I've seen it credited as Yvonne. I think I refer to it as Yvonne. And I think it did. Didn't he officially release it on his own, Costello?
No, it's not Costello. It's Eric Stewart with 10cc.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. He officially released it, right?
Yeah, because he was a co-writer.
Eric Stewart officially Yvonne, number 3, I'll go with Yvonne for my choice.
Well, just so you know, the 10cc version came out in 1995. Very different from Paul's, because it has a reggae arrangement to it. And on the album, it's listed as Yvonne's the One. For years and years, I thought of it as just being Yvonne. But
right, my Dutch import says Yvonne.
We're going to say Dutch import a lot, aren't we, on this show?
What they are.
Right.
Of course. Dylan, you're next.
All right.
You're number 3.
Yes. Okay. I prepared a top 5, so I have quite a few honorable mentions.
We'll get to them later.
Yes. For my number 3, I think Paul's demo of On the Wings of a Nightingale is just fantastic. I absolutely love it. And honestly, I don't know what the source material of that demo is. I don't know what it was recorded on or anything. If they're able to clean it up, then that's great. But even if it ultimately doesn't sound any different than how we've always heard it, I think the old cassette tape quality works to its advantage in a way. It kind of reminds me of listening to those Quarrymen demos. It's almost like John is there singing this Everly Brothers song with him, but it's just Paul 25 years later, where he's in a position to be friggin' writing for the Everly Brothers. It's a beautiful song. And shout out to my friends, the Whitmore sisters, who I've actually been doing some work with recently, who just covered it on their new album, Ghost Stories. But yeah, Paul's version, I love all the versions of it, but Paul's is probably still tops for me.
Interesting choice. Yeah, the more primitive. What's that?
I was just trying to. When was that recorded? Do we know, like 83-ish?
I think it's 82 or 83.
Right, Paul's demo of that song. Yeah.
Because it's on. The album is EB84.
Right.
But and we got Dave Edmunds to thank for that, because it was on his recommendation that he write a song for them.
Right.
Yeah. That's one of my absolute favorite songs that Paul has written for anybody else. It goes right up there with the Peter and Gordon stuff and Come and Get It. And it's just so tailor-made for them. But I was going to say, in response to what Dylan said, sometimes the more primitive the recording sounds, it's almost like it's more intimate in a way.
I agree.
So yeah, I wasn't thinking about songs that he gave to other people, but yeah, you can certainly count that. Okay, Tom.
Well, I'm going to start off with 1984, going to the David Foster sessions. And yes, this is the same David Foster that was a sessions musician for George Harrison. I don't think a lot of people put the two together, but he did a couple songs with McCartney and his band with Dave Maddox and David Gilmour, and what a lineup that is! But the song,
I know this song. I know which one he's gonna say.
Yeah, the song I'm talking about is Lindiana.
I know
and which again was on, I think it was on the Return to Pepperland bootleg and the Pizza and Fairy Tales bootleg, and Andy and I have talked about this track before, and it's really nice. I really like it, and it's I like the more up-tempo ballads, where it has a nice soft opening, and it's mellow for the verses, and then when a chorus comes on, it starts, it picks up the pace and starts to rock a little bit, and I really like this one a lot, and I think that this would have been a nice addition to, Flowers in the Dirt, or even maybe single worthy if, there was a little bit more work on it, maybe be a little bit better better guitar work, maybe a nice Gilmore solo on there, because there's some really nice elements to the song. There's some nice bass at the end from Paul. I love the drumming. I think it's Dave Maddox on drums on this one, and his vocals are still really strong for this one, and I really like the theme of the song. I like telling his partner not to give up her dreams, and really like the message in that song. So this is one of my favorites. That's too bad it didn't get released on the Flowers in the Dirt box set, but maybe if we get a press to play box set, hopefully that'll be there.
Yeah. Well, I definitely love that one, Tom. But sometimes when I think about a song like that, I was one of the shifts that I used to do in radio was an adult contemporary shift on a station in Westchester, New York. And this was in the mid 80s when Lionel Richie was king, and Christopher Cross and Barbra Streisand and all that stuff. And a lot of what Paul McCartney wrote through the years, at the time, like No More Lonely Nights was a huge hit, not only on the pop charts, but adult contemporary, as was So Bad, for that matter, or Take It Away, or Ebony and Ivory, and those songs. Indiana, I think, could have worked very well in that format. I don't know if it would have been a pop hit, but yeah, definitely has that sound.
Probably needed to be edited just a little bit.
Maybe, because it's 5 minutes. But then this is right when this is David Foster's the man at right now. I mean, he brought Chicago back from the dead.
Sure.
At this point in time, so a little more work on this one. I think it could have, like you said, seen some adult contemporary success.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Little tidbit here: not only was David Foster on George Harrison's albums, well, Extra Texture, but he also was part of the band Attitudes, which was on Dark Horse Records as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool. And he's on Ringo the Fourth.
That's true. Very good, Dylan. All right. My number 3 choice is Waterspout. I remember there was a bootleg called Suitable for Framing, and that song was on there. It wasn't the full version, but to me, it was just so hypnotic. It's so catchy. And as soon as I heard it, so it's an outtake from London Town. I questioned why that was not put on London Town. This is something that, we keep repeating on our podcast shows about songs that we wish would have made the album and ended up being, a bonus track on a CD single. Just imagine if all the stuff that was released as bonus tracks from Off the Ground didn't come out. So much great stuff right there. But Waterspout was one that I think had a lot of commercial potential. I could see it as the follow-up to With a Little Luck. Great vocals from Paul, just a great hook, great melody. Everything flows so well on that. So Waterspout is one where, I just question, how could he leave this off the album? All right, let's go to our number 2 choices. And this time we'll start with Tom.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to continue the conversation with Waterspout. You're right. London Town Sessions. This was considered for all the best for here in the States, and obviously it probably would have been on a Hot Hits Cold Cuts version. Throughout. Especially into the 80s, because there was 2 occasions where they were talking about putting out a Cold Cuts in the 80s, and you would have figured that probably would have been on there as well. You talk about a follow-up to With a Little Luck. I think there was a big since Girls School did okay here, I thought this would have been a nice follow-up to that, and then maybe do With a Little Luck came out a few months later down the line in 78. So I think there was still room in 77 to have had this out and have a little chance to succeed here. And the drumming I think it would have been killer for that time. And I love the lyrics. I love the bridge, especially. I love the only love can get you at it,
Only
and
love.
in a minute you will find yourself swimming in it. Just your basic silly McCartney lyrics, and
But the way he sings that line,
the way he sings it is great.
It's
Yeah,
incredible.
absolutely. Yeah. Only love can catch you up today and take your breath away. It's just great McCartney lyrics. So yeah, so Waterspout is my number 2.
So you would have seen that as just a standalone single?
I think it had standalone single potential. Absolutely.
I think it works with the London Town nautical theme, though, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many like standout tracks on. I mean, because it's got that that folksy feel throughout the album.
Yes,
and then it's got some crazy songs that really don't fit, but somehow it does.
I mean,
it
at
all
50,
works.
at 54 minutes, there's no way that Waterspout could have been added
Oh
on.
no,
not
right.
1978.
Right,
would have been,
right.
Something would have had to get cut.
Right. So that way, I think it would have been better as maybe a U.S. single, because I mean, Mulligan Tire. Let's face it. I mean, that
Right.
ended the year.
Right.
Everywhere else. So let's see if we late fourth quarter 77. Let's see if that had a chance.
Yeah.
Okay. I could have seen other singles from London Town doing better. I don't think it was really promoted right, because I always felt I've Had Enough shouldn't have been the second single myself.
What would you think?
Cafe on the Left Bank.
Okay.
I thought that had more potential. That's just my ears anyway.
Okay.
Dylan looks puzzled.
Well, if I'm allowed, my number 2 is Waterspout.
Okay.
So just keep talking about this. I mean, it's such an infectious song. I've always kind of gotten Paul Simon vibes from it. Maybe it's his vocal delivery, not sure. But yeah, I mean, another fantastic melody. I know that there's a few different versions circulating in various stages of post-production. So I can't tell you which version of Cold Cuts I'm referring to, but the take that I'm most familiar with is produced really well. There's a kind of a steady progression of vocal and instrumental layering as the song goes on. It's maybe a little too long or too repetitive at the end. You could maybe cut off 30 seconds or so. Not that McCartney's ever had any problems doing that ever. But just a minor quibble. But I mean, I don't want to I know Andy loves London Town, and I don't dislike it, but I 1000% how this Mull of Kintyre and Girls' School, knowing that those 3 songs could have been on the album, and I won't name the songs I would have taken off because I'll get in trouble here, but I mean, to me, I have my own personal 10 or 11 song London Town playlist that's a completely different album, and
is Boyle Crisis on there too?
I'm not the biggest fan of Boyle.
That could have been left,
but
that should have been.
But yeah, I 1000% don't understand why this wasn't on there. Don't understand why it couldn't have made all the best. But I'm really excited for it to get an official release when we get the archival box of London Town. Which let's just hope
it's that it's the mix that you're talking about, because I think we're both talking. You and I are both talking about the same slickly polished, produced version of that song that I think we all know. And if you allow me to continue, I'm going to finish it out with my number 2 is also Waterspout. So just to round out and make it a foursome, it's Waterspout for me as my number 2. Dylan touched on this as well, and again, as a collector of these Dutch imports, as we've said, as I've been for 25 years, there's lots of different versions, not versions, but mixes of this track, monitor mixes, mixes where you just hear the percussion available, and I've listened to all of them, and they're in varying degree, states of quality. But there's there's 1 or 2 really, really good versions. One on the aforementioned B-sides, Dutch album. That is great. It's better. It's actually the most produced version of Waterspout that I've heard, and I think that's the one Dylan's talking about. And if you haven't heard that one, make sure you check, because the balance of that mix of Waterspout is tremendous between the percussion, Paul's vocal, everything about it. It's just a slick, polished version of the song, and I love that's been my go-to version for decades. And and again, when I first heard that song, I was like, what? How is this not? I would listen. I would have. I agree with you, Dylan. I could see those three songs you mentioned going on London Town, and even though I love the album, I would be in favor of those three going on and replacing a couple of songs on London Town, not other ones, but yeah. And I also like Tom's idea that it could have been a standalone single. I agree with that too. Either before the album or maybe in 78. I don't know, but I would have liked it to have been a standalone single, as it, maybe the beginning of 78 or something like that. But clearly, it's a song that he was proud of to float it out there and possibly include it with all the best in 87, only to have it pulled and withdrawn at the last minute. But I mean, it'd be nice to see what he has to say about it, if he has anything to say about it in the archive release when he gets interviewed. Because sometimes he does speak about these tracks in the archive books, like when It's Not On, he talked about that a little bit on Pipes of Peace. So hopefully an 80-year-old Paul can have some good memories of Waterspout when we get this eventually. But yeah, I think it's any true McCartney fan will tell you Waterspout is, the top of the list of the unreleased McCartney tracks, and no different for any four of them.
I'm thinking that the version you're referring to that you think is the best, I think it's the first version of Cold Cuts. I have two different versions of it, and the first version is the one that I always go to. It's perfect in the mix all the way through. But the Beatles really championed this whole idea through the years of standalone singles. So, sometimes I get a little bit bothered by a lot of fans who will start saying something like, oh, Paperback Writer and Rain should have been on Revolver. Well,
No.
But you got a lot of fans that want that don't understand the way that the Beatles release things. They wanted to put out a full album and a single on the side there that wasn't on the album. So when you bought the album, you got more for the money. One of the fun things about being a Beatle fan through the years is all these standalone singles. And I think of them that way.
Not only do they want it on the album, but they want it to be the lead-off track, because hearing it for the first month on the radio wasn't enough. You got to bring it home. And
they want to hear the first track. Like, give me a break, right?
But even if you put those songs on the albums and you take out two songs or what you think might be the weakest songs, then what do you make the single?
Right.
I say, look, I mean, With a Little Luck was clearly such a single worthy song. Have that be the standalone single, and Waterspout fits better with the vibe of the album. And
that's a good point.
Seriously, because there is sort of a nautical theme going throughout that record that With a Little Luck has nothing to do with. So make that standalone single, put Waterspout on the record.
Yeah.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Good idea.
At 3 minutes and change, or the 5:45? What would you release as a single?
Let me get on the phone with Paul's people, and then we'll iron out that.
All right. My number 2 is one that you all mentioned, and that's Yvonne's the One. And I must say, this brings back a lot of memories for me, because when I did my radio show, when I developed the show that became Every Little Thing on WDHA in New Jersey for 10 years, this was the most requested bootleg song of all of them. I got requests for this all the time after it was released as a bootleg. And, it's such a perfect song melodically. And like you said, Andy, the falsetto vocals are just so, whenever everything flows, the bridge, it's almost like it's effortless. I don't understand how he could have released this at all somehow, whether it's on an album or a single. Sometimes I think of, and I might be giving a little bit too much credit here, because I think sometimes, Paul does listen to a lot of what's out there currently. And even though this is not his first time doing falsetto vocals, like on Girlfriend, which would be an early example of something like that.
Mhm.
I'm thinking of like Christopher Cross when I'm hearing
Mm.
Yvonne's the One. Like think of Laura, which is
Yeah.
done in a very high vocal range like that, and that was a hit a few years before he did this. So it's possible. I always kind of associate that song with Think of Laura, but I do love Yvonne's the One a lot, and that's another one that I think could have been a big adult contemporary hit for that time. All right, so we should have a drum roll, Dylan. Leaves us with
Wait, Dylan plays drums?
Every now and then.
we'll get to our number one choice right now, and after that, a few honorable mentions. But we'll start this time with Dylan. What's your number one choice?
Well, like I said with Waterspout, hopefully we'll be getting London Town this year, and hopefully we'll be getting Back to the Egg at the same time, so we can finally get an official release of Cage. I mean,
Yeah, all right.
what a cool song. I mean, this is a multi-part McCartney song that I think works really well. It's got a really off-kilter vibe to it, but kind of like Temporary Secretary, he takes this really strange piece of music and still somehow writes the catchiest melody over it. And the guitars have this great crunchy distortion, but it's not necessarily this like all-out rocker like a lot of songs on Back to the Egg. The heavy guitars kind of act as this foundational and melodic support to the song. And man, Paul's voice on the very last verse after the key change, when he's nailing those high notes with that perfect amount of grit, I mean, it's sublime. It's absolutely remarkable. I mean,
and then the way it just ends, right? Won't be in a cage. Over.
Perfect. I mean, just what a cool, and it's interesting because I mean, Back to the Egg has a few multi-part songs on it, and so I'm like, did he think that this would just be unnecessary because he had the other medleys on it? I don't know, but and I like Back to the Egg a significant amount, but this is another one too where I'm like, don't understand how this wasn't on. What a great song. Love Cage. Love it.
Who knows how McCartney thinks?
Yeah, I mean, I think firstly known as emotional moments in the writing stages, right? That's what he called it. Right.
Emotional moments.
Tom, what's your number one?
Well, my number one, if it did get released, it might have had to also had a Nick Mason song credit because of Nick Mason's postcard to McCartney and or Eric Stewart. The first line of that postcard read, "When I first met Yvonne, volcanoes erupted." And so thanks to that, we got Yvonne's the One, or if you want to call it Yvonne or just Yvonne's the One. But one of my favorite opening lines to a McCartney song ever, "When I first met Yvonne, volcanoes erupted and laughter flowed into my life." Amazing. Again, just he does ballads just so well, and we've mentioned this, the singing is top notch. Yeah, completely different from on 10cc's Mirror Mirror 1995, more of a reggae feel, and his singing is fine on there, but it just doesn't come anywhere near what McCartney was able to do with his falsetto voice. And even if it did make it on Press to Play, and I know how much you love the 80s sound, but
yes.
If it did have like an 80s sound to it, I mean, I still think this would have been a successful song. I don't know if it really would have made a single or anything like that if they added the whatever the production, the 80s production to it. They could have done anything but what Eric Stewart did to it, and I would have been happy with it, because for me it's all about the lyrics. The lyrics are just so strong on this track that any production besides a reggae production would have have suited me just fine. It's just a beautiful track, and if he was able to keep that falsetto voice going, throughout the whole. So if they could have taken that vocal track and then and done whatever they wanted to do with it, who knows if he would have kept it just like that or kept it more like a Footprints or something like that, or if they would have went something crazy, like a Pretty Little Head, who knows. But again, it's just one of those things where why wasn't this released? And I really wish I would have heard this first on your radio show, Ken, but unfortunately I heard it first on Chris Carter's Breakfast with the Beatles years ago. So but yeah, Yvonne's the One is my top unreleased McCartney song.
Yeah,
obviously I mean I guess you got to say that it has been released, but it's not McCartney, not by him.
Right.
Oh, hasn't been released. Sorry.
Well, not by him.
I didn't know that former NFL wide receiver Chris Carter had a Beatles radio show.
Very talented.
By way of the Minnesota Vikings.
Very talented.
Yeah.
Very.
But and you kind of said this yourself, not everything on Press to Play, and I love the 80s sound,
right?
But not everything sounded like Talk More Talk and Pretty Little Head.
Right,
there.
exactly.
Like you said, Footprints. Exactly. If Tough on a Tightrope could be a bonus track, Ron's the One would fit away nicely. Yeah,
perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I would have loved it. I mean, hey, listen, Hang Glide's nice too, but I would have loved this on a 12-inch B-side. If you're gonna do 3 tracks, one on side A and then 2 on side B. There's no reason why that couldn't have been thrown on there. Spies Like Us instead of My Carnival. Let's throw that on there.
Well, in our last show, we said that very often Paul could have easily have put out double albums, just to put all these bonus tracks on there. He always had more than enough material.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So that leaves Andy.
So my number one is a little bit of a left field pull here. I'm going with going back to 1974 when Wings were in Nashville. They recorded an instrumental version of Tomorrow that's never seen the light of day. It's never really been bootlegged well. I see Dylan nodding because I know he knows where I'm going with this. It's really kind of lost in the shuffles of the bootlegs. You don't see it. Sometimes it's credited as Proud Mum. Yeah, edit Dutch import. It's credited as Proud Mum sometimes, but it's really just a kick-ass reggae version of Tomorrow, instrumentally. And what I love about it is that it's filled with the Wings synthesizer sound throughout the whole thing. And Tom, have you heard this?
No, I have to look it up.
Yeah.
It is.
It's on one of the Cold Cuts bootlegs.
Okay.
It's on there, and it is just a fantastic version of Tomorrow. And it actually took my brother to tell me. We were listening to it one time, and I actually didn't know it was Tomorrow. And he goes, "No, Andy, that's Tomorrow. Don't you hear the melody?" And then I heard it. I'm like, "No, this is Tomorrow," and it's incredible. It's and you listen to it, Tom. You'll be like, "Oh, right, this is right from those sessions of Nashville," and all the stuff that was going on there, the Moog synthesizer. I mean, but it's really kind of an oddball in terms of McCartney obscurities. There's one and done. I love it. I love the playing on it and the synths. I can't get enough of the synths on this. And it's a reggae style version of Tomorrow, but I absolutely love it. It's perfect. I don't get tired of it. It's been in my playlist for decades. I absolutely dig it.
It's been a while since I heard it, so I'll have to go back and listen. But that leaves my number one. I'm kind of surprised none of you guys even mentioned this. My number one in a landslide is Return to Pepperland.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how on earth. Well, I have a theory as to why he didn't release this.
I know what that theory is too.
Around the time of the 20th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.
The Beatles came out on CD for the first time, and here's George Harrison putting out When We Was Fab at the same time.
Yeah.
But I still think that Return to Pepperland should have come out. I've never heard so many hooks in a song as in this one. And this, it's Paul's gift, his greatest gift, that he can write so many sections that all work well together. and it's catchy as hell. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've used that phrase, but I don't know how that couldn't have been a hit record, at that time. It's just, once it's in your head, it's there and it stays there. And
All right.
his vocals are just perfect for the song. I love the whole arrangement and the way that it ends with the Indian instruments. It's beautiful. It's fantastic.
Ken, do you like Return to Pepperland or When We Was Fab better?
Return to
Gotcha.
Pepperland.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
I love When It Was Fab too. Sorry. I
Wow.
mean, you talk about infectious. That
Don't
song
be
is
sorry.
really infectious.
No, it is. There's
Never
no
apologize for your
Right,
opinion.
yeah.
Even when they're wrong, don't ever apologize for your
apology.
Oh, jeez.
So, what do you
Wow.
guys think of Return to Pepperland?
It's okay. I mean, I think maybe it would have made a nice B-side. I don't know if I would have liked it on, Flowers on the Dirt or anything like that. But I
That could
think
have
it
been
would
a
have made a nice
standalone.
piece.
I actually was going to say, I think that would have been a nice standalone single, 20-year
Yeah.
thing. But sandwiched it. Yeah, I don't think it obviously fits Flowers in the Dirt. I don't think it fits Press to Play's vibe either. So a standalone single. I love Return to Pepperland. It's it's one of my honorable mentions. I have two. That was one of them. I don't think I love it quite as much as Ken. Just because it's lyrically a little bit of, and I don't like attacking Paul for his lyrics because I really don't like people who do. But this is one, the whole Nelson Mandela stuff. I don't really vibe with that kind of stuff. But melodically, the song is just awesome and full of all the great things that Paul has done with his gift of melody, and it's in that song and the hooks and stuff like that. But yeah, it's one of his best unreleased songs. I'm right with you.
Okay. Dylan? he's holding back here.
I'm very happy that you guys like it. I far be it for me to rain on anyone's good time. So I'm glad that you guys enjoy it. That's
He's honest.
what I'll say about it.
Okay. A few honorable mentions from each of you. Let's start with you, Andy.
Cage. Dylan said it earlier. Cage definitely is an all-timer for sure. Classic. Really should have been on Back to the Egg. Maybe in lieu of, I would have taken like To You off and I would have thrown Cage on. Easily.
Yes.
Easily.
To You is very interesting with all the synthesizer sounds that are in it in the middle.
Yeah, but he started writing a melody and then gave up halfway through. It's not half the song that Cage is.
No.
But it's very punkish. It's very different in that regard.
Yeah, but you already have Spin It On.
You already got
so you could have more.
check the punk box, which he does with 86 To You, and throw on Cage, and we've got London Town now reconfigured and Back to the Egg reconfigured and people are calling them as good as Band on the Run. So yeah, that's my honor.
We did it.
Okay.
We did it. That's my honorable mention.
Tom?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with Cage. I think that's an exceptional track. Again, another head scratcher there. Why wasn't this ever released? I'm kind of fascinated from time to time whenever I listen to Boyle Crisis. I think with maybe a little more work on that track, it could have been something. But then, there's also the track, one last one that was on the Rock and Roll High School.
Right.
Movie.
Did we meet somewhere before?
We meet here somewhere before. Yeah. In the film a couple times, but never released on a physical format. So, unless you want to count the movie being released on, Blu-ray or DVD, but never in an audio CD or album or anything like that. So.
And never complete.
One more I forgot was on my list here. Circa 1980. Seems Like Old Times. I love that.
Yeah.
I love It Seems Like Old Times. And I thought that was a really great, two versions of that out there. One is a piano
Right.
demo, you know. The Other Day I Met Someone I Had Known in Another Lifetime. That really, that if that had been developed a little bit more, that could have been a special song. It Seems Like Old Times. So absolutely love that song. There was a lot of potential with that one, and it's too
I
bad
think
he
that
gave
was for a movie, I believe, of this for the same name. Am I thinking
I know same
It
time
sounds
next
right.
year was
Yeah.
same time next year? Okay, yeah, I think that was.
I mean, I've got Chip's book open right now to it, and there's
Yeah.
they don't mention anything about a
Okay.
movie for this
All right,
one.
I'm thinking same time next
It's-
year is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just that makes a
But
great title for a movie, though.
Right.
it does.
Seems
It
like
does,
old
but
time.
absolutely,
So
Mm.
yeah.
yeah, definitely that's a great honorable mention. I think too. Seems Like Old Times.
Okay. Any more you want to mention, Tom?
No, nope. Those three.
Okay. Dylan?
Well, I know they've technically been released as a part of Ubu Jubu, but I would love to see standalone releases for I Love This House and Squid.
Us. Yep.
Those are easily my two favorite songs that usually make up the Return to Pepperland collection. So I'd like to have them on their own.
Right.
It's barely even a composition, but I really love the Unbelievable Experience.
Yeah.
It is a totally mindless knockoff that he probably hasn't even thought about since he recorded it. But like, of all the types of McCartney songs that could be described as like charming, that's my favorite type of charming McCartney.
Right.
I want a remastered official release of Soily from One Hand Clapping. Maybe it's cheating because it's been released on Wings Over America, but we've never had an official studio release, and that's live in studio. And it's my favorite recording of that song. I think I'm in the odd minority of people that don't prefer any live cuts on Wings Over America to the studio versions, which doesn't mean I don't like it, but what I like about the One Hand Clapping version of Soily is that there's a real palpable energy of them playing the song to each other rather than to thousands of people. So it's got this kind of perfect combo of like intense rock and roll and intimacy. And Paul's voice on it is awesome. And then my number 4, had we done a top 5, was Yvonne's the One. So we would have had a sweep there. I mean, it's a beautiful song. One of my favorites from that time period.
Okay.
Sing quickly, and I mean, the acoustic guitar sounds great on the rough versions we have now.
Right.
So when they clean it up a bit, it'll sound great. And I cannot stand the awful 10cc version. So I want an official release of this gorgeous recording. So the definitive version is available.
Okay. You mentioned a few that technically he did release. It's just that you wanted them as standalone. So
yeah,
right.
It'd
okay.
be nice.
Just about everything that I included in my honorable mentions were ones that you guys mentioned already. Lindiana, definitely. Seems Like Old Times, really. I think by itself, it seems pretty complete, but you need a full band arrangement of it. So we've only heard demos of it. And just like you, Dylan, I believe in the Unbelievable Experience. That's another one that's so catchy. I put Cage in there. I like the quirkiness of Robber's Ball a lot. Did We Meet Somewhere Before? Although when you listen to the whole thing, it really does go on too long. That's one that should be trimmed. It's over 5 minutes, I think. And also, it was released technically on DVD, but in Liverpool.
Yes.
It's that acoustic song.
That's a great one.
Yes.
But,
Yes.
yeah, that came out as a bonus track on the Liverpool Oratorio on DVD.
Oratorio.
Yeah, but it's a really pretty song. Very affectionate.
And he played it live in Liverpool as well too.
Yeah.
Right.
Do we prefer Paul's song in Liverpool?
Ringo's. I like Paul's.
Paul.
Paul's.
Yeah. Paul's.
Okay. All right. Very good. Why don't we finish our show? The last show that we had with Tom and Andy, we were talking about a very interesting topic. What was Paul's creative peak in his solo career? Well, actually, no, his entire career. And we had all kinds of different answers. And Dylan was going to be on the show, but unfortunately couldn't make it, but he wanted to give his 2 cents on this particular topic. So Dylan, take it away.
Yeah, I apologize again to you guys for not being able to make it on short notice last week, but here now, all is well. You know, Paul has so many incredible assets to his artistry, and certainly one of them is his sheer productivity. You can look at all four of the Beatles and make a pros and a cons list for any of them, but the one thing you could never ever knock Paul for is the sheer love that he has for music and producing music, to the extent where, and I think that all of you, and especially Ken, I know you're the biggest champion of this, it almost seems borderline insulting sometimes when you hear anyone talk about how Paul or any of them, like, well, after the 70s they just didn't do anything worthwhile, which is insane to say when you think about how much has been created since then and how much good stuff has been created since then. But with that disclaimer, I simply don't think you can argue. If I initially had a 5-year window that I picked out, but if you want to look at even just a decade, looking between 65 and 75, I mean, I simply don't know how you could argue. I mean, certainly he's produced quantifiably, as much stuff since then. But even as much stuff as I truly love from after that point, to look at the fact that in those 10 years, this guy was able to either single-handedly or the majority write Yesterday, Let It Be, Hey Jude, Blackbird, Band on the Run, Maybe I'm Amazed. I mean, and not even, I mean, so much of Sgt. Pepper, Magical Mystery Tour, The Fool on the Hill, the entirety of Ram, everything from the Red Rose Speedway sessions. I mean, it is simply unbelievable how much he wrote, and certainly we see that in the Get Back documentary. The guy is just overflowing with ideas. I mean, not only does he have Let It Be and Long and Winding Road ready to go, he's already got the skeleton to Another Day. He's got the skeleton to Backseat in My Car, and plus so much stuff that ends up on Abbey Road. He ends up in a lot of ways being the main creative driving force behind the Abbey Road medley, which so many people view, and I think rightfully so, as one of the major achievements in Western art across all forms. I mean, so again, not at all knocking anything that came before or after that point, but to look at not just the quantity, but the quality and the magnitude of that time period. I don't see how you could argue that any other time period would be his peak.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's well
said.
said.
What's your brother?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, the thing is, quantity is something that you can't dispute. Quality is. And that's where we all have our own opinions. And it's hard for anyone, in my opinion, to argue your point there. I mean, as one of my colleagues said, if all he did was write Let It Be, The Long and Winding Road, and Maybe I'm Amazed, that's a career. Just those three songs alone. So, but the one thing that amazes me the most is how prolific he has always been, not just in that period. Mm-hmm. And as we talked about in our previous show, before he releases an album, he's working on material from that album and then thinking ahead of stuff that comes out on other albums later on. He was always thinking ahead, and he was always prolific, amazingly prolific. When is the most prolific period of his life? That's hard to say, and along with the songwriting, you've got the musicianship, the bass lines that he came up with. How much of the credit do you give with a lot of Lennon-McCartney songs to the fact that it was a joint collaboration with some of those songs. You know, do you give Paul less credit when John wrote a substantial part of those songs? You know, you got to put that into the equation as well.
Yeah, but I could even argue, you know, if Paul did all that stuff and just write the melody to "In My Life," you know, which seems to be something that a lot of scholars have seemed to surmise recently, that lyrically, no doubt, it's John, maybe with some editing help from Paul, but that Paul helped, you know. So I don't think that you can discredit that. And you know, when you talk about peak, if you're thinking about all aspects of artistry, then yeah, I'm talking songwriting right now, but also within that time frame of 65 to 75, he emerged as one of the top bass players of all time. He wrote the bass line to "Come Together." He wrote the bass line to "Paperback Writer." He wrote the bass line to "Something," you know. and he in less than an hour composes and plays everything on a demo for "Come and Get It."
In one day, in an hour, hour.
So yeah, and Ken, a perfect point, because you could argue, okay, between maybe he did quantity wise as much work in the 90s, between not just Off the Ground, Flaming Pie, but his classical work, the initial Fireman album, so much stuff. And you know, maybe there is someone out there that thinks that 10 years is as amazing as his 65 to 75 output. But even if you think that subjectively, if we're looking at it again from an objective standpoint in terms of magnitude and, you know, influence, I mean, I don't think it's, and that's the only, I mean, what can you say?
You and I are on the same page. I said 66 to 76, but you know, that's semantic. Same. We're on the same page there, you and I.
Sure.
Well, with me,
I have Yesterday, you have Silly Love Song, so you know.
Bingo. That's only because I'm yesterdayed out, so I'm like, I ain't gonna count that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, not to belabor this point, and you know, it's something I bring up every now and then, and in no way am I in any way lessening the greatness of what Paul did early in his career. But the way that our industry works, as artists get older, they gradually get less and less airplay on the radio. So the chance of them having as great an impact, you know, on the music industry is less. That's just the way that it is. There's a certain period when they get airplay. And it's a complicated thing, especially when you're talking about radio, because there's different formats that appeal to different audiences and all. And there are certain formats like adult contemporary, where certain artists were more successful later on, like an Elton John or a Rod Stewart. You can get airplay as you get older for a time, but it's never the same as when you first strike in your early years. And, you know, my concern is always about the quality of the music, and I'll never say anything that will diminish the greatness of what he did in the Beatles and in the first 5-6 years of his solo career. But there's so much that I've loved since then, and almost consistently. Yeah. So it's difficult for me to say. You know, if you're talking about impact on the world, yeah, the Beatles as a group. If I'm just talking about the songs and the music and his total output, you know, it's been mainly consistent, in my opinion. And I've always said from Press to Play on, I think has been like a renaissance period for him, in the sense that just about every album he's put out, I consider to be very good to great. That's just my opinion. So there you go. We all have different opinions. What's that?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, there's stuff, I mean, from McCartney 3, which is not even a year and a half old, that I personally think is some of the most interesting stuff he's ever done.
And viewers, check out our channel on Dylan's video defending Pretty Boys.
Well, that's more of a, in some ways it's a personal thing. I mean, I will obviously fight to the death about that song, and you can see that video, but I mean, a song like Deep Deep Feeling, I think, whatever your personal feelings are on it, I think that's a really almost brave song for him to be making. I mean, that's a song that would have maybe made Electric Arguments. And I think that one of the biggest quote unquote mistakes that Paul has ever made was not releasing Electric Arguments under his own name. And I think he learned from that mistake by having I think the Stones to put something like Deep Deep Feeling on his own album, some of the more experimental stuff on new
Mr. Bellamy.
I mean, or what's the song I'm thinking of, Appreciate on new
Struggle.
Caesar Rock, Andy's favorite song on Egypt Station. I love that. But even like I mean, I'm 100% there with you, Ken. And this is probably another conversation for another day. But it's interesting seeing as different artists get older. There's kind of different, I think, standards for different artists depending on what their sort of reputation is. You look at someone like Bob Dylan, who probably chart-wise has comparable success to Paul. Egypt Station and McCartney 3 both hit #1 in 2 different countries, and then rocketed down the charts. And I don't know what, I know Rough and Rowdy Ways went to #1. I don't know what happened after that, but you have an artist like Dylan who people don't judge him and McCartney necessarily on the same levels. And then you have artists like the Rolling Stones, who have barely put out any new original music over the last 20 years and kind of have developed more into like the legacy act, title of things. And, so it isn't, I think if you asked someone on the street who like kind of pays passing attention to things, they might tell you like, oh yeah, Dylan, like he's been on this renaissance since Time Out of Mind in '97, and he's put out all this great stuff, and that's awesome. And oh yeah, McCartney, like I think he's done a few things. Like, they might not understand, because they might view McCartney more as a guy like, well, that's a guy on the radio who produces hits and big
so they're
songs,
not looking at the same
songs
way.
aren't getting the airplay. They're going to view it as him not having the success, or it not having as much validity, which to Ken's point is not the case. I mean, you look at someone like Petty, who's one of my favorites. Wildflowers was kind of a transition for him. And there were a lot, You Wreck Me, You Don't Know How It Feels, Wildflowers, those songs all got airplay. And then, there were some songs, I think Walls got some radio play, maybe a song or two from Echo, but like, he's another one, like, I think if you ask a lot of people, like, post Wildflowers, Petty, they're probably not as familiar with, because they're used to everything he did before that, where there's going to be at least one giant single, from every record up until that point. But, again, it's like, well, if you take the time to explore it, you might discover something you like. And you might discover that just because something's not getting airplay, doesn't mean that it's not great in its own right, or valid at least in its own right.
Yeah, I've always been disappointed that he didn't get like a radio renaissance period. I mean, like look for instance, like Elton John did. I mean, he had some big hits in the 90s. Clapton with Change the World, the album he did with Babyface, was,
or the whole
Santana was super unknown, Supernatural. Thank you. I mean, these Rod Stewart with all those damn
Great American Songbook.
Great American Songbooks. I mean, he got a lot of radio airplay too with those, and and McCartney unfortunately didn't. I mean,
well,
shame.
I think there's a good reason for that as well, and that is that most of the singles that Elton John put out, and Rod Stewart especially, and that period of time with Eric Clapton when he was doing those acoustic ballads like Tears in Heaven, those were all very ballady, adult contemporary. Form. I don't want to say formula, but it fit that format. Paul has always been all over the place musically in what he chooses as singles.
Plus that period where
that doesn't help him.
That period we're talking about in the 90s with Paul and comparing it to Dylan with Time Out of Mind in terms of the commercial radio airplay. The 90s, you got to remember with Paul, you really only had 2 albums really to kind of go by, Off the Ground and Flaming Pie, because the anthology took up most of it. Okay, the late 90s, okay, Run Double Run, but really the 90s, he's got 2 studio albums. That's it, really, of proper albums of Off the Ground and Flaming Pie. And Flaming Pie did massively successful. I mean, in terms of, and Hope of Deliverance from Off the Ground did very well as a single in Europe. So I mean, I know in America, in terms of single airplay, and Ken was on the radio at that time, so he knows it better than anybody. It just wasn't happening in terms of this country. But I mean, he still was doing okay. It just,
he's doing okay. Yeah.
It wasn't like,
But it wasn't like the sales
if
of
I
the
can
70s.
be the voice. If I can be the voice of the young hipster, and speak for the generation of those of us who are addicted to our phones and can't buy houses because we only spend our money on avocado toast, we Flaming Pie is still extremely well regarded to this day, and remember, it's certainly not, I think, on the level as like a Time Out of Mind for Dylan, but generally very well regarded and recognized, and quite a few people really, I think, still view Chaos and Creation. I think a lot of people who are plugged in, but maybe not to the level of obsessed that we are, they might tell you like, oh, well, Chaos and Creation was his last great one, because Chaos and Creation got a lot of great reviews, and his last albums have too, but Chaos and Creation, I think, was and this isn't speaking on the quality of that or the quality of any records, but I think there's a focus to Chaos and Creation that I don't want to say that the other record that like Egypt Station New and McCartney 3 don't have, I think, but Chaos and Creation is its own thing, almost in a way that Flaming Pie is its own thing. So those are the records that I think the lay person will tell you are, the last gasps of greatness.
To me, Flaming Pie is an all-time record, but it's bogged down by 3 mediocre tracks, in my opinion, with Really Love You and Used to Be Bad, and I forget the other one at the moment, but if there's 3 tracks that just, let's just
say those are the only 2 I can think of.
Hold on, let's just.
I like If You Want to Be Bad.
If you wanna,
if you wanna,
all right.
I like If You Wanna.
But I think compare that to Chaos, and we're diverging here a little bit, but I think Chaos I like Flaming Pie better, but Chaos as a cohesive album, one from the beginning to the end, works better, I think, as one kind of collective thought. I mean, Flaming Pie is a little over the place.
Yeah, it depends, but he's also not going into Grammy season and sweeping, the big 4 catalog, the big 4 awards either.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I will say though, I think we feel these connections to these artists, and so like when we see an artist we love get a #1 album or #1 song, we're like, that's great. But I think sometimes we put a little too much stuff. Ultimately, to me, the charts mean nothing. Awards mean nothing. What matters?
Oh, I don't believe that.
Do we like it? Do we like it?
Something?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I would never say that. I think the charts are very important because it shows if it's getting airplay and to a young audience, that's the buying public, what they think of it. I'm not talking about the quality.
What's
airplay?
I
understand what you're saying.
But what's airplay in 2022? Ken, the kids that I know are going to go Spotify. There is no airplay. It's a playlist.
Okay, but I'm just comparing what it was like in the past to what it is like now. If the music
Mm.
is not being programmed to the young people, it's not going to sell. And just to clear something up, because Dylan brought up how like McCartney 3 went to number 2, Egypt Station went to number 1, Dylan's album went to number 2 or whatever. Yeah, but it's on the charts for 4 weeks, the top 200. And the reason why it's on there is because all the hardcore fans go out and buy it. Some of them buy multiple copies. I'm not saying that's the majority of the fans.
Do you know anyone like that?
And that's it. But again, the question is, if this music was exposed to young people, but they're not going to program, it's still radio, and every radio format has its own demographic audience. The question is, if you program veteran artists, whether it's Paul, Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan, to young people, will they respond to it? Will they react to it? We don't fully know. A lot of young people gravitate towards classic rock of the 70s and 80s and 60s, and if they like that, why wouldn't they like the new
Classic
stuff?
rock to kids today is the 90s now, Ken. I hate to tell you, but it's the 90s. Classic rock to most kids is the 1990s now.
Well, I'm talking about if I listen to a radio station near me that has a classic rock format, they're still going to play the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, they're still playing
with
the
a little
70s.
bit.
I mean, Rumors is
But
still
not too much
flying
60s.
off the shelves and at record stores.
I also.
But
don't
how many
think that-
radio stations? How many radio stations are playing new tracks from the 1960s? From the 60s, not
from
too
the
many.
60s, not too many.
Very
Well,
little,
it's
very little.
it's more 70s and 80s now, or because you'll get your radio stations that will play 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Right.
You know, and it's just not the classic rock format is almost kind of, almost dead in a way, because they're playing the more poppy stuff from the 70s and 80s and 90s.
Right.
No,
and I don't think that we should speak.
There's two different formats here. There's classic rock and classic hits. And those are two different things. Classic hits can be more poppy and more singles oriented. A classic hits channel can play something like America
right,
or Hall and Oates, and a classic rock station is not.
Right.
And they'll mix rockers too on the classic hits channel.
Right.
But
I also don't think that we should speak, too ill of the 90s, because a lot of brilliant people were born in the 90s, like 1991. A lot of great men and women.
that was a dead year. That was a completely
this
dead year.
guy.
I don't know of anyone.
Well, let's,
He's a really nice guy.
He is. He is a nice guy, and it's okay because he gets it. He's the millennial that gets it, so he gets us old geezers.
There's a few of us.
There are.
But anyway, I think the charts are always important because it shows, certainly when you're taking a look at any artist, and we do this all the time on Talk More Talk, look how well the solo Beatles sold when the music was played on the radio. The charts tell you, exactly what the public felt.
But this
It's
ain't
just not indicative of the quality of something.
That's a whole other issue. I'm just talking about there's always going to be records out there that sold very well that you don't like, and songs that didn't sell that you do like. But the charts tell you the ones that got airplay and how the public responded to it. And if they don't hear the music, then how can any of these singles or albums do well, perform well, and in this day and age, especially for veteran artists, have longevity of any kind? So that's why I bring up the charts a lot.
I know. I guess I just think to put a cap on it that we can adjust maybe, I don't know, our expectations or at least just our standards for something. I think there's a big difference between if Paul McCartney puts out an album and it spends 3 weeks on the charts, and if Billie Eilish puts out a record and it only spends 3 weeks on the charts, then it means something, because it's like, wait, this is someone who's young and popular and everyone's into. What happened? Why doesn't this have staying power? Whereas we kind of know what to expect, like, with some of these older artists. I guess maybe that's a better way to say it.
My argument is it shouldn't be that way. All artists of every age should be respected. Maybe it's not reality, but
Yeah.
I do believe that if Paul puts out a new record, Ringo, any of the people that we mentioned, that young people should get to hear it. You can't
I've-
force it
I've
down their
played-
throats, but
Yeah. I've played Nothing for Free for a bunch of younger people that I've worked with over the last couple of years, and they go crazy for it. They love that track.
there you go.
You know?
Good track.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'll hear from someone that heard a solo McCartney track in a supermarket.
Mhm.
And it's a song that
I
they'll
heard
never
My
hear on
Brave
the
Face
radio,
a few weeks ago.
Right.
you know, and they'll
Right.
tell me that they like that song. And I'm saying, why
Right.
can't that be on the radio? So
Right.
anyway, so this has been a great conversation. And you guys want to plug anything right now? Dylan, what you've been up to?
Same thing I think as last time. I'm currently playing with a band called the Minks, Minks. We just put out a new single a few weeks ago called Lavender. We have some more new songs coming out, potentially a full album later this year. Other than that, I am keeping on.
Okay. Tom and Andy?
Partner, go ahead,
Yeah.
partner. Plug this away.
Okay. Well, you know,
Don't make
we
this
just
a 10-minute thing like you do
No,
on
no, no,
Talk.
two, no, 1 minute. Listen, we had a great time with Adrian Sinclair and Owen Ling on our latest episode talking about Live and Let Die. We learned so much about that track, and that's really what I wanted, you know, for that show was to get, you know, was to miss some, you know, bust some myths and to learn more about the production and the making of that track, and we did, and we got to learn more about the McCartney Legacy book that's coming out later in October, and then Owen Ling's new George Harrison in the '70s book coming out in March. So look for that. Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast on our YouTube channel. And just real quick, I'm going to be doing a video real soon, hopefully Tuesday, and it's going to be called Legit or Counterfeit, and it's going to be all about, I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, there we go. A little bit. That's
Wrong
a
key,
that's a
bye.
fugazi. That's a
Ah.
fugazi. That's a fugazi.
We'll
my
see.
friend.
We'll see.
Sorry.
We shall see. But it's brung to you by it's well known in the radio circuits as the LP that Paul and Linda made during the making of Ram and distributed to radio stations throughout the U.S. for them to play snippets of before tracks from Ram. So you know, that'll be coming soon.
Tom, I loved the new episode and I loved the new theme music.
Oh, well,
Ah,
it's
Yeah.
funny you should say that because I got right here in my notes. Thank Dylan once again. You know.
thank
And
you,
I want-
Dylan, for
and thanks,
a
yes,
new
yes.
a new year, a new
Right.
theme.
New theme. Yep,
yeah.
absolutely. And you know,
you.
we appreciate everything that you do for us. You're like the, you know, the unofficial, you know, third leg, and you know, and you're always welcome on the show, and we always have a great time with you. So thank you again for that wonderful theme.
Thank
All
you
right.
for saying that unprompted.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys for being my special guest. Oh, Andy, thank you for the little tribute there to Gary Brooker behind you.
Oh yes. Yes.
Oh yes,
Great
yes.
talent right there.
Yes.
That's an amazing song, A Salty Dog. Love
Amazing
that one.
record.
Yeah.
Amazing record.
Mm.
What a great
Yes.
voice and a great talent that we lost
Mhm.
right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this has been a tremendous
Right.
show. Thank you, Andy, Tom, and Dylan. And we'll see you all very soon. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't done so, please subscribe. And we'll see you next time.
All right.